Has there ever been a better example than the Olympic Games? From the idealism of its refounding literally 100 years ago, to the money-driven colossus that's become an instrument for Cold War and a vehicle for the individual power and corruption of certain members of the IOC of recent date. Dick Pound and I were both at McGill at roughly the same time. I was an obscure freshman, and he was already what we called a BMOC, a big man on campus, champion swimmer, famous, tall, good-looking. He went on to a powerhouse career as a lawyer and as a professional at the International Olympic Committee. At the very top of that ladder, responsible both for working out the television deals that stuffed the IOC coffers full of gold and of addressing and with luck solving the epidemic of doping that had become endemic as nations and individuals had forgotten about brotherly love and it's how you play the game and determined to win at all costs. Dick Pound. Nice to see you again.
You're always a big man on campus. Well, thank you very much for that very fine introduction. I remember our national basketball coach, who some of you may have met years ago, called Jack Donahue, who was at an occasion like this, and whoever was running it said, well, listen, everyone pretty well knows you, so just get up and introduce yourself. Which he did by saying, good afternoon, my name is Jack Donahue. I'm Canada's national basketball coach. I'm 61 years old, I'm married, I have 5 children and 2 grandchildren, and I sleep in the nude. Which he said was usually only a problem on long flights. I had a choice about what to speak on today, and I thought, you know, this is an audience that would probably be fascinated by the tales of a tax lawyer. I mean, could I get you giving a round of applause like you did for Lewis if I told you how you get around 212 1B7 in the Income Tax Act? And I thought, well, instead of talking about my day job, it might be more interesting if I talked about one of my volunteer jobs, which is, as Moses has said, as a member of the International Olympic Committee. There is a drug problem in sport. There's no denying it, and there's no escaping it. It's probably not surprising. I mean, sport it's a subset of society. And, you know, we're surrounded by Enrons and World.coms and Tycos and all of these things in business. We've got evaporation of standards in the professions, in academia, in the media, you name it. So it's not surprising that there's been a failure of governance in sport as well. Although I think the calculus is much less complicated than in some of these others. I mean, I think it ought to be pretty simple. I mean, if you don't like the rules are the race is 100 meters. The shot puts 16 pounds. You know, you can't hollow it out and have a 10-pound shot because you're not as strong as somebody else who's throwing a 16-pound. That's the deal in sport. One of the deals is you don't take these performance-enhancing drugs. Certainly athletes, the vast majority of athletes, don't want to be worried about whether the person in the next lane or across the net or in the same ring is cheating and is bulked up on drugs or whatever the substance may be. I don't think anybody else does. And I don't want my kid or your kid or anybody's kid to get beaten by 1/10 of a second or you know, 6 inches by somebody who's cheated. I think gradually the public at large is coming to understand that that's really the calculus of sport, and that's the way it should be. We have a problem as between professional sports and the so-called amateur sports in that they have different rules. And we're working at hockey and baseball and basketball and so on to try and get them to adopt similar rules. And I've written to all of the commissioners of the American professional leagues, for example, to say, listen, here's the World Anti-Doping Code that we put together. We think it's a pretty good idea. Why don't you have a look at it and see whether it's something you might not want to do as well? And it's almost as if they went to the same writing school. The letters that come back say, you know, pick a sport. We don't have a problem. To the extent that we might have a problem, we already have rules that deal with it. And thirdly, it's a matter of collective bargaining. We can't change the rules without the permission of the players. So I write back saying, well, is there anything on this list of stuff that we have that you think your athletes should take? You know, they should be filled with EPO and steroids and so on. Well, then everyone looks down at the ground and they just say, well, it's, you know, that's the way it is. But we've started to make inroads. We have a partial deal with basketball, for example. And basketballs, they don't really care about performance-enhancing drugs. What they're worried about are the recreational drugs. It's what their players do off the court, and they get into fights, or they get into car accidents, or they beat their spouses, or whatever it is, and that gives basketball a bad name. That's what they're worried about. They don't care what these guys do to get out there. And the same is certainly true with baseball. Baseball's in the anomalous position of the ones that are fighting the hardest against good drug control legislation are the players, or at least the Players Association. And we say, what is wrong with this picture? There is some hope for progress. We're going to go into Athens in a couple of months. These games start. Imagine picking this on Friday the 13th of August. If they're ready, they say they'll be ready. And those of us coming from North America, knowing the complexity of the games and all of the systems that have to be made to work together, would go crazy. But in the Mediterranean culture, they seem to think that if you're ready at 11:59:59, you know, you're ready in plenty of time. See, you know, we said we'd be ready. But it is a chance, and to go back to some of the issues I've been talking about in doping, it is a chance for us to go back to our roots, and to go back to and really sort of rethink our commitment to the ethical basis of sport and what it ought to be. So the risk we're taking on the one side is outweighed, I think, on balance on the other. You know, the kids that go to Athens in August, I mean, they're going to be competing in Greece, where the ancient Olympics were held. There will actually be one event in the ancient Olympic Stadium in Olympia. And that's going to be special. That's not going to happen in their lifetimes again, or any of ours, because it'll be a long time before we go back to Greece, just because the games move around. And there's a reason for that. I hope it'll be great. Thank you for the chance to have been with you this morning, and enjoy the rest of the conference.